All right, so moving right along, we're going to talk about exercise-associated hyponatremia. This is something that in the past probably 5-10 years really, it's received a lot of recognition. You've probably heard about it in regards to marathon runners. That's kind of where this issue kind of was thrown into the spotlight, was with ultra marathon runners kind of dropping out of races and having big issues. And so we've recognized that this is a big problem that occurs when exercising in a hot environment. So by definition, the word hyponatremia, what that means is low sodium, low salt in the bloodstream. So when we draw blood from these patients and we measure their sodium content, it measures very, very low. Interesting enough, this is not really a problem with salt. It's more a problem with water. So what happens is, we have all this access to water. People just pound the water down and drink way too much free water, and they dilute out all those salts and all those proteins in their bloodstream. So this is actually what causes the problem. So other names for this, dilutional hyponatremia. So we're diluting our bloodstream by drinking too much water. Some people even just call this water toxicity. There's some argument for calling it water toxicity to someone who doesn't have the medical background to know what hyponatremia is. They're going to hear water toxicity and know that, oh, that means that I've had too much water. So there's some benefit to that as well. Where does this all come from? The whole idea that if you're thirsty, you're already dehydrated. You've probably heard this dogma. This was something that kind of originated from a campaign that Gatorade put out back in the early 2000s. They had all these commercials that were saying, if you're already thirsty, you're behind the hydration game, your performance is going to be worse, you need to drink more water. So what this meant was that people were concerned that their performance was going to go down. They were concerned that they're going to become dehydrated, so they just started drinking a lot of water. The problem is that when you drink too much water, you're going to have much worse problems. And so that's kind of where all this comes from. So what's actually happening? We kind of have a couple different factors at play here. So behavioral factors, basically someone is drinking too much water. We already just talked about that. The idea is that they're kind of afraid of becoming dehydrated. Some of these people you can easily point out. I've been out on the trail and I'm walking along and someone's hiking past me and they've just got a big gallon jug of water and they're just pounding it. That's someone who I immediately see and I'm like, that person is drinking too much water. It absolutely happens. So environmental factors, we have heat and physical stress. So just the stress from being in the hot environment and the physical stress of exercise, these are going to cause us to increase that antidiuretic hormone, the ADH. So what that does is it causes us to hold on to all that free water. We're not able to pee it off, and so our blood volume just goes up. This causes an accumulation of all this free water. And so, you guys probably remember from your physics class the idea of fluid shifts. And so, here we have a beaker with some diluted water over here and some concentrated water over here. Due to the rule of osmolarity, we have all this free water just shifting towards the more concentrated area. And so what you should think about is this area of dilute blood is now shifting into our tissues, into our cells, and causing swelling in those areas. This becomes an issue, particularly in our cranium. So our brain starts to swell, and we start having pressure on the brain tissue. So think about a head injury. These people actually look a lot like head-injured patients because that brain is swelling within that fixed volume of the skull. So that's kind of where we start seeing a lot of our issues. So recognition of hyponatremia, what types of things do we see? Well, first of all, we're going to have a history of drinking excessive water. How much is excessive? It kind of varies from person to person. But if someone tells you that they had, 4 or 5 liters over the course of, 2 hours, that's going to be too much. There's a big gray area kind of in the middle where you're like, is that too much? Is that too little? That can be kind of hard to tell. But when it's pretty obvious that the person's been drinking excessive amounts of water, this is what we should be concerned about. In addition to the history, we're going to have symptoms. So, our mild hyponatremia symptoms are going to be headache, agitation. Oftentimes they have this 1,000-yard stare where they're just kind of like staring off in the distance, not really focusing on you or the things that are immediately around them. Oftentimes nausea, vomiting. So the vomiting is an attempt for the body to expel a lot of the free excess water. So oftentimes when these patients vomit, it's a large volume, it's really clear, it's really watery. They're just trying to get rid of all that excess free water that's still in their stomach. Little or no urine output. So keep in mind that as we have this increased production of ADH, that antidiuretic hormone, we're not able to pee, we're holding on to all that water. So even though they're overhydrated, they're not creating urine. So that can be kind of tricky to keep in mind. They're oftentimes lethargic, so they just feel kind of tired. They can have this paradoxical thirst, so they actually feel thirsty even though they don't need more water. Oftentimes, as they're starting to progress from mild to severe, they're going to have some paranoia, they're going to be very anxious, and they're going to have this, what they call a sense of impending doom. So they just feel like they're going to die. They might even say like, I really don't feel good, I feel like I'm going to die. That's quite common with this progression from mild to severe. When they go to severe hyponatremia, this can happen just like the flick of a switch. They might be talking to you, they might be with it, and then all of a sudden they just tank. So what this looks like, altered mental status, they're not able to answer questions appropriately. Usually they'll start to seize, so seizures are one of the more common signs with severe hyponatremia. And these seizures can go on for a really, really long time, with no break in between them, no full gain of consciousness between the seizures. So can be quite significant. Ultimately, they can have a coma, they can become comatose, and then they can die. So again, this is all from the swelling within the brain. Commit these to memory. So how do we manage it? The very first thing that we want to do is remove them from the heat source and cool them down. So remember that we have that increased production of antidiuretic hormone as a result of the heat and as a result of the physical stress. So if you can get them out of the heat, get them cooled down, and then calm them down. Again, they're going to be pretty anxious, so if you can just calm them down, get them to relax, and wait it out. You might have to wait it out for quite a while before that mechanism turns off, but if you wait long enough, they oftentimes will get better just on their own. As soon as that antidiuretic hormone turns off, they're just going to start peeing, and they're going to pee a lot. And it's going to be very large volume, very clear urine, and that's them self-correcting. That's them getting rid of all this excess water. You can consider an oral hypertonic solution. So what that means is a very salty solution for them to drink. Some studies have shown that it's kind of effective. Some have shown that maybe it's not super effective. This is just a quote from one of the studies. But when you create this solution, what a lot of places will do is they'll just take bouillon cubes, the chicken broth, and they'll just make a really, really salty solution. I was looking through some of my old protocols that I had out at the Grand Canyon, because we see this a lot out there. What they used to do is they would actually take 4 bouillon cubes and mix it in half a cup of water. So we're talking really, really salty. Remember, these people don't need more water, so we need to make a low volume, so just half a cup of water with 3 or 4 bouillon cubes to increase the salt content and help draw some of that fluid out of the tissue and into their bloodstream. So in general, for mild hyponatremia, so the symptoms where they have a headache, they just don't feel very good, they're still with it, they're still able to answer questions, calm them down, cool them off, give them some salty snacks, and just wait it out. Sometimes these patients can take quite a long time to get better, but ultimately being patient and cooling them down and continuously assessing them for progression into the severe symptoms they'll do just quite fine. If they are in that severe category where they are altered, they're not answering questions appropriately, or they're seizing, or they're comatose, these guys need immediate evacuation, they need advanced life support care, and they need to be in an intensive care unit to be monitored. Be careful. You always want to err on the side of caution. If you have someone who is in mild hyponatremia and you're in quite a remote area, yeah, maybe you calm them down, rest for a while, and just start slowly moving out of that backcountry environment so that the evacuation and the availability of care isn't so remote. But just keep in mind that ultimately keeping them calm and resting is going to be the best thing for them. If you have to wait it out with the severe patients, put them on their side so that if they do vomit while they're altered or while they're seizing, they're not going to aspirate it. Still try to cool them down, manage their airway as best you can, and again, just try to get that evacuation and that advanced life support care. At that point, there's not really any other treatments that you're going to be able to do that's going to help them at the first responder level.